Right. For those joining the live stream, we are discussing a thorny problem of how to handle missing data in all sorts of Wolfram language situations. So, the way this came up in part was even in the data repository, where data has been somewhat cleaned, we're still dealing with situations in which some data is missing and messy. And I guess the issue is what then happens with our various functions. Okay, so Brett, maybe let's talk about, by the way, I hope somebody is dealing with that thing for 11.3. Okay, so let's make a list of what both how does data, how is data missing? And then what should consume missing data? Okay, so for example, how is data missing? Well, an example would be it's actually missing of ... or it's simply not in a desired format, e.g. numerical. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
See whether we can...
All right.
Oh, we already had a discussion about missing data. I don't know how long ago. We should check what was there. Okay. Okay.
That's not surprising. Like you said, it's a thorny issue.
Yes. Well, we've been looking at this for years, right? Okay. So what should consume missing data? So one example would be graphics functions, right? Another example would be machine learning functions. Another example would be statistics functions. Another one would be dataset. And there are probably others, okay? So fundamentally for graphics functions, what action should one take? Presumably, the primary action is don't plot it. Do we agree on that?
That's the general philosophy. Specifically, plot what you can and ignore the rest.
Yes. But now, do we give a message?
Currently, no. I mean, pre-version 6, we did. But it was one of those cases where you got one message for every element that wasn't...
Yeah, that's stupid. Okay, do we show a pool of missing stuff? Right, so there's some plot types where there might be a pool of missing stuff. Like, for example, we could imagine a histogram. We could imagine that, you plot the main histogram and then you have over on one side a gray bar indicating all the stuff that couldn't be plotted.
That's an interesting idea. And like, obviously, histogram doesn't do that. But something like bar charts will leave space where the data would have been.
Right. Okay. So look, there's the main action is don't plot it, but other things are, another. So what are the possible actions? One of us don't plot it, and do we leave space for it? Do we indicate a lack of data? So let me give you an example. So array plot, as I recall, if I say array plot, 1 0 0 1 1 foo 0 1 1
has a lovely brick red where the foo should be.
Right. So that's an example of one where we do show something which is right, because if we showed it as white, we would be confusing people. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So similarly, in a surface, so there are various actions, e.g., in a surface, we could, interpolate across the missing data. Okay, another thing we do for some of these missing data, we should set this up. Another thing we do, we could use a dotted line in list line plot. So that happens, for example, if we did, well, who knows whether we can, I mean, in Wolfram Alpha, right, we do that. If we were to say, you know, something like, let's do it. You know, if I were to say temperature in Timbuktu, who knows how good the weather recording stuff is at Ouagadougou Airport. Okay.
Right. So Tuesday night, there's
right. There's a gap. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so that's another modality. I don't know what our heuristics are for that. Do you know? I mean, we don't do anything.
No. I don't know what their heuristic is for that.
Okay. So walk me through some other things we do. So, I mean, another case, in the case of bar chart, if I go, you know, 1, 2, 3, foo, 4, it'll just look like that. Mm-hmm. Arguably not the right thing. I mean, arguably that should indicate that was that should do something more like this.
Perhaps, yes.
So let's walk through. Okay, I mean, so let's talk about cases where it's just absolutely wrong. So, for example, let's say date list plot. Okay, mm-hmm. So there we've got. I don't know how to get a good list of dates.
You can just use yesterday, today, tomorrow, and whatever values you want. Right, and that's going to be shown pretty much nothing, I think.
Yeah, that's obviously wrong.
Right. You know, if you had today for tomorrow foo, then you would get a section of the line corresponding for, you know, that it could draw that it had the 2 endpoints for.
Well, that's just silly. I mean, that's just silly. I don't understand why that's any different. Okay, so let's look at some different cases here. Okay, so we've got that case.
When the date is
what's that?
I think when the date is missing from my memory, there was a problem as well.
Right. That's the example that really triggered this meeting.
Okay, so let's look at this case. List line plot of 3, 4, 5, 6 foo 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that just breaks the line there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the case where if I do something like what's a good example here? If I just say something where there are a large number, let's say table I don't know, square root of I goes to 40, and then let's say replace part and then let's say 20 goes to foo. Okay, so that's what that's going to look like. Now, arguably, we're being quite inconsistent in all these things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, arguably, that would be better done this way. That is, when we know we're joining, if we're joining and there was data missing there, if we think we're doing a list line plot, we should be joining but putting a dotted line there. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, how would that relate to some of our other ways of indicating missingness? I mean, we have various options for showing asymptotes and not showing asymptotes and so on.
Right. And so if we go back to array plot, I think it has, is it documented? I want to say that it has an actual option that controls the style of that red, or maybe it's just a method option that's not documented, but
gosh, what version am I running here?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. So
okay, so in machine learning, Etienne, you've got some missing data, some functions that do things with missing data, right? You've got some kind of missing, what do we call it? Missing data.
It's not there yet.
There's missing input and missing.
No, but it's not there yet. It's in development.
But it's not there yet. We are developing that.
Right. So missing data rules, missing data method.
I don't know. This must be other things. It's not really to us.
Wow. Okay, so we've got some existing handlers. Which are, in particular, missing data method, missing data rules, missing data method. Okay, so what are these things? Missing data rules is for semantic import.
So that looks like a detection thing.
Yeah, by the way, who's PMing here? Is Sushma here?
I don't think we have any.
We do not. Who would you want here?
I think Sushma would be terrific.
Let me see if I can find her.
I just want to make sure that this goes in the meeting that we have about data cleaning functions, because I had forgotten about this. The heck is that? Well, okay, so missing data rules is basically specifies substitutions for missing data. And that's not, I mean, arguably...
Is it that, or is it the other way around? That first or second example looks like...
I see. Specifies, no, I see. Specifies, okay, so specifies which data should be replaced by missing.
Right, so this is like for formats where you have some special number that...
Yeah. Right. So that's the case where okay, so missing data method, what does that do? Okay. So that's really what we're talking about here.
Sushma's here.
Is things like interpolation and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's an example of that there. So that's really what we want to deal with. So, like, for example, what we would potentially have, potential formats, potential objects. One would be a missing data style, right? Mm-hmm. Which in the case of something like this could default to a dotted line.
Right. And if you look at your question missing star in the other notebook, there's actually missing style, which is used by georegion value plot.
Why didn't that ever...
I don't know why that didn't get pushed back to array plots.
Sigh. That's why we're having a meeting like this.
Yep.
Okay. That's so bizarre. That's just totally weird. Okay. So let's look at georegion value plot. Actually, let's just do missing style. I'm sure we intended to do that then.
One example.
Oh, how horrifying. Okay, so first action item here would be that array plot should get a missing style, right? Which seems quite straightforward.
Right, and there's probably related things like matrix plot and
right. Okay, let's inventory more of these. Okay, so list line plot could have an automatic missing style. So what would we like? Okay, so let's
so let's back up just a little bit. So I think for the visualization functions, we have at least 3 cases that things fall into. Right. So one is where the thing that's missing
has a space for it.
Has a space for it, similar to array plot.
Okay, right. hold on. So let's okay, so what we've got here is types of missingness. What the heck is the noun form for that? Types of missingness in visualization. Okay, so one thing is there's a space, there's a place to put something, but the data isn't there. Right? Okay, so examples of that include array plot, georegion value plot, bar chart, I believe, pie chart, I believe, too.
No, not pie chart.
Okay, so let's think about pie chart. So pie chart, yes, pie chart. What happens if I say pie chart of 1, 1, 1, foo 1?
You'll get quarters.
I see. Okay, so then okay.
Right. Okay. In the case of bar chart, we know how wide a bar is, generally speaking.
Right. There's no place to put something. Well, there's no predefined space. In other words, this is a case where the value defines the amount of space.
Right.
Okay, so in other words, this is a case where something else defines the amount of space, defines the space. The value is just determining how it's colored, is determining, e.g., how it's colored. Right? Okay, so that's one situation there. Okay, the second thing is there's no predefined space to put something. Yeah, of which this is an example.
Right.
And that's okay. So another one is
I mean, so basically, I mean, to some extent, I would separate bar chart out of that first category.
Okay, well, hold on. There's another category here where the thing that's missing was supposed to say where something should go. Okay, so that's in the category of that's date list plot with a missing date, for example. Okay, why would you separate bar chart from the first thing?
I mean, so in the case of array plot and georegion value plot, if the value is missing, but that's just a styling for a region, right? The region is entirely defined whether or not the value is missing.
All right, there's a subcase here, which is in inferred quotes X value cases, e.g. lists of values. So that is the case of bar chart, right? That's an inferred X value.
Well, my point is, and I'm not sure whether this is captured by your inferred X value. In the case of array plot, we know exactly how big that square is that it would go into.
Sure.
In the case of bar chart, we know how wide it is, but we have no knowledge about the height.
Right.
So we have sort of half the space dimension.
I see what you're saying. Okay. So this is actually a different case. You're right. Something else defines the position, but not what's rendered there. But what's rendered there is missing. What should be rendered is missing. Okay, so the cases for that are bar chart, 1, 2, foo. Also, list plot, 1, 2, foo. I claim. There's another case like that. Something else has defined
but not
the position.
The tuples case of list plot.
Exactly. Right. But not list plot 1, 2, foo bar. Right?
Right. That's the next category.
Right.
Or the no predefined, it's with
well, actually, let's break this apart, because this category, no, we're not right here. Let me point out. Look, we've got
this is going to get complicated.
Yeah, we've got this, and then we've got this. That's part of this category.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Actually, I mean, for list plot,
conceptual. I mean, in some ways it is, but rendering wise, no.
Yeah, then it's just going to be missing. I mean, it just isn't there.
Right.
Well, or is it not there? I mean, that we could have a tick. Okay, so let's consider that case. This case, okay, here could have a tick, a mark on the x-axis. That one could have a mark on the x-axis, right, to indicate that missing thing. But this one is hopeless.
Right. That one possibly, if we had some, going back to your concept of pools or something.
Yeah, right.
We just have some collection of gray points off in the corner or something.
Right, but let's consider this case here. Let's consider the case, this here. That could have a tick on the y-axis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's consider list line plot. See, okay, there's no predefined space to put something. Okay, that's okay. Then another case is there are things let's see. The missing spot could be quotes papered over. Okay? By which I mean list line plot. Right?
Right.
Of 1, 2, 3, foo, 5. let's see. So then, what are other examples where it could be papered over? So plot is another good example where it could be papered over. Plot square root of x from -3 to 3.
Correct. Any of the surface, variants of these sorts of things.
But don't they already have a papering over mechanism?
Not really.
Doesn't plot 3D have a way of saying what to do when it's missing?
No, it has a way of saying what to do if it gets if the plot range gets clipped, automatically.
I see. Right. Okay, so that needs a missing style as well. But of course, in general, for the function plotting stuff, how does it do its adaptation around the region of trouble? Does its adaptive algorithm correctly map the region of missingness?
It should do a decent job of it, because basically what it does is it looks at here's a value, it's 3. Over there is missing or none or whatever.
Right. So these could all
and then it picks a point in between.
Right. So everything we've described could be handled by a missing style. The only problem is in this papering over method. Okay, so these things need a missing style, but they also need a papering over method. They need a missing. This one needs. Okay, so these need missing style and a missing data method, or missing method or something, right? Because they need to say whether it's interpolation or what it is.
Right.
Right. So examples of missing data methods. So here, if we say missing method, missing data method, whatever, and this is where the machine learning folk might, because what do you have, Etienne and Amir? What do you have for missing? Because you have imputation, right? You have missing imputation of various kinds.
This will be, so are you talking internally or the top level function we'll have?
Well, what do we do? What do we have in terms of options right now? Do we have options for missingness? What do we do right now with missing?
No, there's no option. So what we do is, so all machine learning functions handle missing data. We automatically find a method. So, I mean, there's some method that can handle missing data, then there's no problem. But if they cannot, then there's a missing imputation method that is selected automatically. And basically, for numerical data, we use dimension reduction that can be learned with missing data, and then there's a way to impute missing data using the dimension reducer. That's what we do. For other data type, like categorical data and so on, there's some naive imputer, like, select sampling from the distribution of the categorical variable, or just taking the most common, or things like this.
Is that a good idea? I mean, in other words, if
it's better. Look, you give a machine learning, feature vector. I mean, a bunch of features, and you have like 100 of them, and one is missing. Are you going to throw out the vector?
Yeah.
If you do that in real data sets, you don't have anything. So that's why.
Right. Fair enough. Okay. So what you're doing then, your missing method, how do you have an option to say how to do the imputation, or do you just go ahead and do the imputation?
No, we just do it. There's no option. Although as soon as we have the top level function missing imputation, there will be some method. And definitely, I think we should use this, since there's already a symbol, missing data method. Probably we should use that to select, to give the users a control on what method to use.
Okay, so missing data method, whatever it's called, missing method, missing data method, whatever we're doing there. My question would be, in the case of plot 3D, okay?
Mm-hmm. So list plot 3D.
In principle, I mean, you know, that's the question. What should you do in that missing style region? I mean, probably in the case of plot 3D. So I would claim, let's take a look at the
function produce missing in plot 3D.
Yeah, if the function produces missing, right? So I claim plot 3D missing style should be none by default. In other words, just don't plot it there.
That's the current behavior.
Right. Okay. So in the case of list line plot, I think there's a possibility that missing style should be dotted. What do you think?
I'm not opposed to that. I'm not sure how much work it would be to hook up. I mean, but I can definitely sort of see a general outline of how we'd go about it.
Yeah, I mean, but it's clearly useful to be able. I mean, certainly that should be possible. Missing style is dotted. Whether that should be default, I'm not sure. I mean, it's like there isn't any data there. So what do you do? I mean, it's a question of event series versus time series type thing.
Right. I mean, and this would help. Well, I mean, like the list line plots get even more interesting. So let's. Here's an example for you to try. Okay, list line plot of 1, 2, 3. Foo 4 bar 5 6.
What the hell did that do?
Right. I mean, so the 4 got hung out to dry because nothing on either side of it was renderable, so we don't get a line segment.
You can view it if you turn on plot markers. That would actually put it in that point for you.
Okay, let's take a look. Well, mesh arrow true, right? No, why doesn't that do it? That seems like a bug.
Try mesh goes to all.
Oh, I see. That's right. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting case. Okay. So in the case where missing style, I see. So what's tricky there, in the case where missing style is dotted, you have to go through that point.
Right. I mean, but the question is, do we have some way of indicating that that point is actually there?
Sure. You'll see the break in the line.
Jumping.
Okay. Yeah, you're correct that if you don't switch on mesh, all you see, if it so happens that that point does not cause a break in the line, if you understand what I mean, does not cause a break in the first, in the jump in the first derivative type thing, then yes, you won't see it. But if it does cause, if it is a control point that actually matters, then you'll see it, which I think is okay.
Right.
All right, let's take a look here for the sake of this discussion at, okay, so, I mean, another category of thing is, all the statistics functions, and I don't think we have a good representative here from those. Does anybody know how we're handling that? What the, I mean, we certainly have some missing data rules for things like time series, but what about?
I mean, I think basic descriptive statistics is probably just falling back to, symbolics, and you probably get, 1/3 this plus, some fraction of missing, for a mean or something.
Yeah, well, that's just stupid. I mean, statistics functions, if we say mean, I mean, unfortunately here, we don't have any special behavior for this, I'm pretty sure.
Right. You're going to have a missing in the...
Yeah. But I don't know what the right answer to that is either. I mean, what should that be?
Well, I mean, and conceptually, it may be entirely different than if you replace missing with X.
Sure. Right. So that relates to what do you consider to be missing? Right. So that's, you know, i.e., what do you consider to be missing? This is.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, do you want Eric to see if he can get Gosha?
Sure. Eric,
Okay. That was Gosha. All right.
Yeah. Konverska.
Yeah, don't get the wrong Gosha there too. Eric, did you understand that?
I used to sit right next to her.
I suppose so.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's see. So where were we here? So what is missing behavior? What was that?
I don't think we looked at that, and I'm not familiar with it, so.
Oh my gosh, it's something really weird. That's funky. That's truly funky. So that is what's relevant for things like mean, right?
So what's the default value? Automatic, I assume, or?
Yes.
I'm not finding Goshen.
Okay.
Well, that's kind of interesting what that's doing. I mean, that's arguably, that should be an option in those various functions.
Can any of those functions take options? Total probably can, but...
It's a little funky. It's a little funky. But what this is doing is it's providing an outer wrapper for mean. I mean, this is like a missing harness, so to speak. So, I mean, the concept there would be, what could we call it? We could call it a missing harness for computations, which means something like I mean, the case here is something like this. Right, which is going to give a stupid answer right now. And it will be something like I don't think this is the right terminology, but something like missing block. No, missing, well, this is again bad naming, but missing handler of mean of blah, blah, blah. That's kind of a stupid way to do it. That's an adverb. It's kind of the adverb mechanism, which never goes well.
Well, so question for Etienne, or at least the machine learning folk.
Mm-hmm.
So the term impute, does that always mean replacing the value, or can it mean dropping it?
No, it means replacing.
Right. So in the case of mean, there is no replacement for missing, which will give the right answer.
Yeah.
Actually, there is a replacement for missing, which will give the right answer, and that's nothing.
Yeah. Mhm. And by the way, since we allow having missing value in machine learning functions, we need to deal with them all over the place to compute these sort of things, for example. So I spent a long time creating functions to, compute means, compute this and that, and work with missing.
Well, what do your functions do? I mean,
it's a preprocessing. Sometimes you want to perform preprocessing on the data. So simplest example is standardize the data. So you need to compute the mean and standard deviation, and so, but you also want to do it fast, right? So usually it checks if it's a packed array, it do it the normal way. If it's not packed, it checks that there's some missing, remove the missing, continue the computation.
Yes.
And the same. So I have some function actually that I call propagate missing. So it's sort of a map, but if it sees a missing, then it still return missing.
Okay, in other words, if it sees a missing somewhere in the computation. So in this case, instead of giving this garbage, your function would cause that to return just missing.
So no, not exactly. I mean, it's sort of a map. So it's something that is, let's say a function you want to map like f, okay? Yeah. And instead you do, I don't know, map propagate missing. Yeah, okay. and
map.
I don't know. Let's call it. Yeah, exactly. Handle missing and f, and then you put a list.
Yep.
And if any of them is missing, it won't make f of missing. It will just return missing. If any of the ABC is missing.
Oh, I see.
One of the function that I use. I don't remember exactly the others, but I had to have these sort of utilities in order to handle the missing.
Okay, so basically what you're doing there. Okay, so hold on. So the f of 1. So what's interesting about this, I think there's a better way to handle this. Okay, so let's imagine that the f itself was wrapped with something that says
if missing queue of slot, comma missing, comma slot.
Yeah, well, that's what it basically is. But that's. I mean, let's write that out. If missing queue of slot, then missing otherwise slot.
Well, f of slot, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what would that be called? What would that be? That would be a missing protected or missing propagating f, blah, blah, blah. Right?
Yep.
And that would be so that is again, it's an adverbial type form, but that just means if it's fed a missing. Okay, so let's look here. Missing, propagating, what's the right word? What is the right word? If the argument is missing, the result is missing, well, okay, fine. Let's just say missing handling of f. Missing handling. So then the semantics would be missing handling of f of missing here goes to missing. But we can imagine something where, so the question is, what happens in this case here, where it's AB missing? Does that go to missing as well? I mean, obviously you can give it a level number. So
right,
that's
I mean, at this point, you're getting into sort of the extended syntax of delete missing.
Right. But this is the inverse of this behavior here. In this behavior here, you are, so there's really two things. There's have missing pollute everything. That's case number one. And case number two, try to ignore the missing. Try to compute around the missing, basically. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
So, I mean, this is reminiscent of, in numerics, the NaN construct would typically pollute things for what it's worth.
Right.
I mean, that's like indeterminate pollutes things.
Mm-hmm. Right. I was just going to point that one out.
Right. So, but none of this is related. I mean, for the visualization functions, this isn't what's relevant. For the visualization functions, I mean, all of this missing propagation stuff, the visualization functions, they just take what they have. They're not going to munge the data. They're just looking and seeing, can I plot it or not, I think. And that's a place where we need to fix this. Okay, so let's just take a look at the root guide page and look at our visualization functions and just remind ourselves what's there. I'm sure you know this much better than I, but I mean, every one of these we can ask what the deal is. It's okay, let me see. Let's plot 3D. Yeah, so I mean, there's a question. What on earth do you do with that? So there you kind of have this membrane. You're literally papering it over. It's like you have no, you leave a hole, I guess.
It actually depends on the case, I think. If you have an array of heights, it leaves a hole. I think if you have triples, it currently pastes over because the code is going in and doing a Delaunay triangulation of the existing points. And
okay, but does it use a different style?
No.
That's bad, probably. I don't know if it's bad. I mean, no, that list line plot, I guess, well, list line plot breaks the line, right? Mm-hmm. Well, or does list line plot, if you have if you have something where you are going, let's say it's list line plot 1, 2, 3, 4, foobar 5, 7.
Add one more point. Well, okay. Yeah, so the plot range knows that it went out to 5, 7. Even though that didn't get drawn.
Yeah, by the way, that's another, oh gosh, that's a complicated case, right? Thing that's, okay, so this is an ugly case. So the missing spot could be papered over, and the subcase of that is once the things around the missing are gone, once the missing things remove the plottability of other points.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt that that's going to not spell correct in any form. Of other data, e.g., so that's e.g. an isolated point in list line plot, right?
Mm-hmm. Or conceivably list plot 3D or whatever.
By the way, I was wondering if we're going to get some comments from our live stream crew. I see one suggestion here related to a different meeting, which was a discussion about atom Q. Sushma, I think you were in the discussion about atom Q, so maybe you can. The suggestion is to name it partible Q.
I see.
Although I have to say the word partible, while a quite lovely word, what on earth does it? Oh my gosh! Well, that's interesting. Actually, I vaguely remember this. It's a this definition. Yes, I vaguely remember this. A system of inheritance in which a deceased person's estate is divided equally among their heirs. Probably a good idea in general. Saves arguments. But I am okay. Actually, when we come back to the discussion of atom Q, we can have that.
Yes.
But if people on the live stream can think of other cases that we're not thinking of, please send something on the chat. Okay, let's take a look at some of these other ones here. Timeline plot. You're basically just out of luck if you don't have a date. Well,
there's not much.
That's a case where, okay, look, things missing was supposed to say where it should go. Okay, so in this case, timeline plot without a date. Again, could imagine a pool, basically. Oh, well, okay. Someone is coming back here with, this is another fail for our friends at Google. Let's see what we say for the definition of partible. Maybe they just picked up a bad dictionary definition. That's what you get by just not actually having any humans pay attention. Let's see whether we do any better.
And it's also possible that your Google thing was just showing the...
Yeah, they just got the wrong thing. Well, that's interesting. Okay, well, thank you for that suggestion. That's a much more sensible... I mean, it's clear to almost anybody what it means. It's just humph. Well, that's a fail for... Don't trust your search engine. I like that, actually. Good suggestion. So, Sushma, can you I forget which meeting the Atom Q discussion was in. Was that an ILD meeting?
No, it was in which Michael Trott was there. It was a chemical-based meeting. I wasn't there in that, but we had a discussion later, like a very brief discussion in LCC. Okay. And that is where we'll bring it back.
Okay. Or we can send it to Core Design. Anyway, I like that idea. Good suggestion. And actually, it's a good suggestion. It's a very clean suggestion because it does, as you say, relate to the parts. I like it. In fact, I'm going to draft a piece of mail here so that I remember. Okay. Okay, let's go back over here for a minute. Okay,
so we're talking about timeline plot.
Yeah, I mean, one could imagine a pool of lost events, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? That's a case where, just like we have a legend, we could imagine a pool, you know, insofar as the timeline plot has, you know, the battle of such and such of unknown date, right? You can just imagine stacking them up somewhere and, you know, having them obviously disconnected from the timeline, like at the end of the timeline.
I'm almost wondering if you'd have to like stick them off into a legend or something to really
make it obvious what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, not if you break the axis, not if you break the timeline axis.
Well, my concern is that if you put it anywhere along the axis, that people are going to read that as...
No, but if you break the timeline axis, that is, if those points are stacked, in other words, if there's an axis and it goes along and then the axis ends, and then these things are somewhere floating away from the axis, I think it will be somewhat clear.
Right. I mean, the other case that can happen with timeline plot is that, I mean, so timeline plot can do intervals. And so then what happens when you have only one end of the interval is
then you're toast.
missing? I mean, that actually ends up being close to like the censoring data in time series and whatnot and statistics.
What is that?
So the censoring is like when you're doing like you're testing hard drives, right?
Oh, right.
And you know that every hard drive is going to fail eventually, but we didn't wait long enough to see all of them fail.
Yes. Okay. E.g. And okay, what are they? Date intervals without an end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Date interval with part of it missing. Okay, so there's another case here, which is number line plot, for example. That's another ugly case, right? Because that's a case where we have the same deal there, is number line plot with intervals with missing pieces.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very unclear what you do with that. What do we do right now?
I imagine it just throws out the entire interval. Unless it blows up completely, but hopefully not.
Let's just see. That's not good.
So I wonder
that would be a bug.
I mean, the pink is a bug, but the underlying primitives are actually not awful.
What do you mean by not awful?
Well, I mean, we have a point representing the end of that interval that...
Is that the right thing, though? By the way, that's for Rob here. I mean, that part of the reason I wanted to... I mean, there's a bunch of QA issues here. I mean, have we been systematically testing visualization functions with weird missing data in them? We must have done that for like decades.
We do it in piecemeal. I don't have a systematic approach yet for it. There are certain functions like list plot and list line plot, which have the screws put to them pretty tightly. There are others like you found with date histogram, which don't.
That one was fun.
Wait, which one did I find? I thought I found date list plot.
The one that was issuing identity messages when you did the date histogram.
Yes.
That actually depended on the time zone in some way. Whether you had dates that were in a time zone other than what your dollar time zone was.
Wow. Okay, that's exotic.
Which I think is why we didn't catch it.
By the way, Rob, that's an interesting. If I don't know who's doing test development for date stuff, but that thing just mentioned by Brett is an interesting case, which you should note.
I found an interesting case myself also with some of the tests were showing up as, they're producing dates that were a day later than I expected because the internals were using GMT time, not the local
right.
time. So as far as the missing data is concerned, it's more of a scattershot approach at the moment. I do try to include at least some missing data.
Right. Well, listen. We should. You obviously have templates for a bunch of these functions. We should make sure we run them with missings in all the possible positions in the templates, and check for pinking and all those kinds of things.
Yes.
What you should do is just take meaningful tests, take tests that are reasonable and just have numbers in them and just zap some of those numbers and see whether it pinks.
Yep,
or does some other crazy thing.
That's what's being done for list plot and list line plot.
Okay, fine. All right. So it seems like that should be extended. But
right.
But listen, let's agree on the principle. We never generate a message. Is that our principle?
Yes.
I think so.
Brett, do you agree? Etienne, do you have an opinion about that?
Sorry, I missed
Okay, so the question is, if there is data that cannot be plotted for some reason, see, okay, so here's a case where I think we should generate a message. If the thing is going to be empty.
And then still
really
return the empty plot.
Yeah, well, we can return the empty plot. I don't have a problem with returning the empty plot, but I think it'd be useful to issue a message saying no data in this plot could be plotted, rather than just, oops, you generate an empty plot.
Right. I mean, the other possibility is, I don't know how much work this would be to have, in the case that there's missing data, to issue one message that says either how many elements were missing or not plottable, or
that would be nice, but I think that's luxury. I mean, I think that just saying there were no plottable elements here is really is kind of a good thing. Someone on the live stream is asking for a message that's saying a message would be nice for any missing data, especially if you automate lots of plots being exported. Well, that's an interesting claim. And I mean, another approach, I mean...
So if only some are missing, are we leaning toward a message or not?
No, we're not. We're not giving a message. And I agree that, so,
I agree with that.
But look, so there's a couple of different approaches we can take. So one thing that we're going to be doing a lot more of is messages that are off by default. I think we're going to have a whole framework for messages off by default. So this might be a way to handle that, is to have messages that are there but are off by default. Okay. The alternative would be to make use of something like a missing behavior that can, issue a message or not. I mean, I think, okay, so this is a whole question about, okay, so this is...
That's an interesting idea, that you have, a missing data method or whatever that, either in its entirety or part of it is complain. Issue the message and...
Just a minute. Messages. Somebody is asking on the live stream saying, Siri is missing a lot of data. This is a different sense of missing data. This is your data. You are providing data, and some of the data you provide is missing for some reason or another. This is not data about the world is being provided, and there's a question of whether we have it all. We make a big effort to have it all, and hopefully when things are working properly, Siri can get what we have. But in any case, okay, so wait a minute. Messages or not for missing data, for missing data and visualizations.
Okay, let me interrupt briefly. I have to run. So
Bye.
Any questions, please? Well,
yep.
No.
Well, okay. So the possibilities are, I think it is important to give a message if the thing is, okay, for interactive, there are two cases. There's interactive use, and there is non-interactive use, so to speak. And by that I mean, well, or interactive paren single plot type use. And there's non-interactive or, scripted use. So what do we mean by that? I mean, in the case where we are generating, a table of 200 plots, right? Generating a message somewhere which says, boy, it's making me think that it would be better to have a visual indication that there's missing data in a plot, because honestly, in that case, I mean, even pinking might not be totally crazy.
I was going to say that, that number line plot that pinked, in some ways is, a very heavy.
Yeah, that's a very, very heavy version, but having some form of pinking rather than just having, I mean, that would be, okay, so let's consider the case. So let's say we say list plot, ABC. That's just going to be a blank plot. Okay, so how could we decorate that blank plot in a way that is visually obvious and maybe has a mouse over, rather than just, oops, there's nothing there? We got to indicate that it's an error rather than...
Do we? I mean, because the thing is that, if you're building something up, right, so you're doing this plot, you're doing that plot, you're doing a third plot, and then you're showing them all together with show.
Yes, if there's no data there, that's fine. You have an empty plot. But if there's data there, but I see what you're saying. You're saying, okay, so look. Okay, first question is, should there be a visual indication? We've agreed that in certain cases, like array plot, there is a visual indication of missing data, right? Okay, so this case of list plot, where the data has no home, it has no place, we don't know where to put it, right? Do we give a visual indication of missing data in the case where there is no place to put the data, right? That's really the question. If we did have a good way to do that, then, I mean, the most obvious way to do it, the most obvious visual way to do it would be some kind of caret, because that's our indication of something missing.
Where?
I don't know where.
No, I mean, where is it our indication of something is missing? Oh, I see. Missing argument sort of thing. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. So here's a related question. Is there a difference in the behavior between your list plot of ABC and list plot of an empty list?
Yes. List plot of an empty list is not an error.
Even though there's nothing to be plotted.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Okay. So it's only in the case where there is content, theoretically,
but the content is messed
but none of it was usable.
Right. Or even some of it wasn't usable. I mean, so here's a possibility. Okay, so let's look back at our list here. We've got, okay, so in this case, something defines the space, the value isn't there. We understand how to deal with that. That's just a missing style, right? Use missing style. Default is something pink, probably. And I think the brick red should be changed to pink but we can talk to design about it. Okay?
Right.
Okay. Something else defines, but what should be rendered is missing. Okay, so all of these cases, that could have a mark of some kind. And probably should have. I mean, it's more informative to mark it than not to. Right, so what if that had kind of a pink dot? Was a pink tick or dot. So for example, in the case of bar chart, right, since we know the x coordinate, but we just don't know the height. Well, we'd have to design a thing in each case. But I mean, in the case of this list plot, we know the x coordinate, we don't know the height. So we could have a pink tick on the x-axis.
Right.
Or we could have like a little stalk sticking up from the x-axis.
Stork?
A stem, a little little piece of stalk. I can't do the American. Stalk. No, doesn't work. Never learned those phonemes. Okay. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea because, I mean, look, if we had a missing style automatic that did all this pinkery and a missing style none that just doesn't plot anything, That would be at least easy to understand.
Right.
Okay, so in the case there's no predefined space to put in a thing, there what we would do is a pink tick, in the gap where the extra pie slice should have been. That would be probably the thing to do. So in a case like this, what would it do? In a case like this, what you would see is little pink things down here, right? A pink arrow or a carrot type thing down here.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be pretty nice, actually. Quite nice, I think. And, is it objectionable? Well, if you don't like it, clean out the missing data. Right?
Or turn off the style.
Yeah, right. Okay, so in the case where there's nothing to plot, what do we do? In the case where there's nothing to plot, okay, in the case where it's completely homeless, where do the carrots go? See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we should ask Jeremy. He might have a good idea. But I'm thinking maybe there's a pink circle somewhere on the plot.
I mean, it would almost have to be at the origin, I think.
No. Why? I mean, what if the origin isn't there? I was thinking it's off on the bottom right-hand corner or something, more like a legendary position. I mean, the problem is what I could imagine it doing that's a little bizarre is a pool, like a pink circular region with a bunch of red carrots inside it. See what I'm saying? So that's indicating that this number of points that are homeless in this plot. I mean, I think it's more useful to give, honestly, it's definitively more useful to give a visual indication of missing data than to just splurt out error messages. Do we agree about that?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think the visual indicators, some of them make sense. And some of them it feels like we're stretching too much and you'd be better off, like this list plot at the end.
Yeah.
That you're better off just issuing a message and not trying to draw anything.
Maybe.
On the other hand, the message are, all red. I know it feels a bit harsh to the user. Like we always feel we made a mistake.
You did.
You did in this case.
Well, not okay. In that case, yes, that's true. That's true.
Or somebody made a mistake, or didn't do as well as they could have.
That's true. That's true. In the case where everything is missing, yeah, that's probably a mistake.
Right. But on the live stream, the suggestion is why not a small exclamation mark with a circle around it in the top right? Not obviously unreasonable, but the problem is, yeah.
I mean, it would still need like a tooltip to just explain what is going on.
Right. So look, the two choices are there's two issues: partial homelessness, so to speak, and total, so to speak. In other words, there are some homeless points, and all points are homeless. Right? If it's partial, then what do we do? Okay, so there's so two cases.
I don't think there should be a message if it's partial.
Okay. Partial.
Because it's pretty classic. You extract some data from the data set, you want to plot, there's some missing.
Yeah.
It's not really a mistake.
No, I agree. I mean, the case where there are no points is usually a case where you just didn't process the data correctly and it's the wrong shape. I mean, that's the most common situation.
Right. You just screwed something up completely.
Yes. And it would be useful to see what the points actually look like. We have another question on live stream about Wolfram-powered API for writing and deploying smart contracts on distributed ledgers. The problem with these meetings is these are working meetings, so we're trying to stay focused on whatever topic we're discussing. And actually, the meeting that I'm late for is about something very closely related to the actual topic that you just asked about. But and I need to get going to that.
Right. I mean, I think in the meantime we can start to put in infrastructure.
Yeah, well, some things here are really quite clear.
So some of them are clear, and some of them, we can put in, the data collection internally to know, how many and which things were considered missing, and then come back and figure out what we're actually going to do with that info.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still wondering. I'm wondering about the case. Etienne, you are arguing there shouldn't be a message when there's partial placeless things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you'd like to know how many placeless things there are, or that there are placeless things in that plot.
Yeah. So in that case, actually, the viewer suggestion of putting some exclamation points somewhere, and then if you mouse over the exclamation, you'll have a indication 5 data points were missing. That could have an little information icon somewhere.
Well, actually, what we do in Wolfram Alpha is we simply say 5 missing points.
Yeah, but this would say it in a message, and again.
No. I mean, we could write it on the plot if we wanted to. I mean, we could put an actual indication on the plot. Look, we could write on the plot 5 missing. The problem with that is it's in English. You might not want it in English. There's a whole complicated story there. I mean, the other possibility is some iconic thing. I'm still a believer in the vertical in the caret as an indicator of something missing.
Well, okay. Here's another possibility, which would be more work. And still doesn't necessarily solve the advertisement problem that there was something missing, which is that if the graphics had, an attached cell similar to images and whatnot, that's a piece of information that could go into there in some form.
You know what? I've got a better idea. Why don't we put a red dotted line around this thing?
That can be done.
And what would happen when we export the plot? Because
red dotted line entirely, or red dotted if you select it?
Entirely. To know that this thing was a plot where something was wrong. I mean, I don't know whether. A possibility would be, well, this is a graphics question. I have a suggestion from our very wonderfully prolific person whose name I must learn to pronounce. S.G. Huisman, but I don't know whether that's the correct pronunciation. Somebody's going to have to tell me the correct pronunciation. That's one thing we don't get from these live streams. I admit that looks pretty nice.
I mean, it helps that there's no points right underneath it.
Yes.
Yeah, probably should be outside the plot, I guess.
Well, really? No, if you put it outside the plot, then you mess up the framing, the alignment of plots with each other. That is nice. I mean, honestly, one of the things that I think we have to, if we were to do this, it might not look quite as, whoops. That's still okay. Actually, that's even better, perhaps.
It has to be further from the point.
Well, okay, change 5 to 50. In the first one, without the 1 over.
It's not horrible. I mean, one could look. There's ways to deal with that issue.
Right.
And then there will be the missing data, whatever option to remove that.
I would assume. Else we do. Yeah, but I mean, so what that's doing, I have to admit, this looks a lot nicer than I expected it to. And in the case where there's absolutely nothing in the plot, it definitely gives an indication that there was something wrong. I mean, the problem is,
could be a triangle as well as a warning.
Yeah, I don't know whether whether that aspect of the iconography is quite right, but this is interesting.
I mean, it's interesting. I think in this case, I'd almost prefer to attach it to, as a frame tick or something, or a frame label, or something small but still outside the scene.
I like this. After my question about how to, okay, we got the answer here. Okay, there we go. For how to say the name. Okay, thank you, Sander. So Sander has another suggestion here. Perhaps not a circle with a disk with white background. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the obvious thing to do for this case. That will certainly, I mean, actually, probably the right thing to do is to have an opacity. If we did that, where we have this, maybe that's crazy, opacity 0.5, if I'm doing this correctly. So I did 0.6 white. Was that going to do the right thing? Stupid, wrong.
You just need the edge form then. Edge form of red.
Yeah, what I was trying to do there, anyway, I didn't. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. But I was trying to, basically gray down the point that overlapped there.
Right. You're trying to add a scrim.
Yes, correct. And Sander here has a triangle, which, as he says, looks considerably harsher. I think a circle is much more benign. I mean, arguably, right. Well, this is very useful. Okay. I think I need to go to my next meeting, but let's plan on picking this up again within a couple of weeks, let's say, and try and talk about some of. I mean, I think you will have found other cases by then. I think we haven't discussed properly missing in the case of computations, and that's a separate thing to do. I mean, I haven't a clue what we do with missing in dendrograms and things like that.
I wouldn't even guess.
I mean, actually, I'm just going to show one more case of missing that's interesting. Okay, it's not quite missing, but if I do slider of 1.2, it does that. That's an interesting model for what to do in these plots. I mean, that supports my idea of these little ticks and things, red ticks. That gives us a model for thinking about those. So I think what we're coming to is, if it's homeless, use a Sander circle, so to speak. If it isn't, if it has at least one coordinate, okay, if it has all of its coordinates, then it's going to use a pink, and it's going to fill with pink to indicate that we don't know what the value is, right? If it has all its coordinates, like in a georegion value plot, right? If it has one of its coordinates, then we give it a caret on that axis, on the axis of the known coordinate. Now, in 3D, that's a little more complicated. We would have to put carets on the base. We'd have to see what that looks like, to put some kind of little carety, coney things on the base. All right. Much as I'd like to continue here, I've got to go work on something completely different. That's also very interesting, but different topic. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. See you later.
See you later. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, live stream people.